everyone, so today I'm going to be showing you guys a tutorial on how to make your own ruffle bedspread. Mine was inspired by the Urban Outfitters Waterfall Ruffle Duvet, and the Urban Outfitters cost $200, which I did not want to spend for a bedspread that I will only be using for 1 year, so I decided to make one myself for a much cheaper alternative. So first I'm going to go over the materials that you will need to make this. Flat sheet. This cost around $15.97, and then I got a twin flat sheet which cost around $5.97. Then I got a pack of quilting pins which only cost about $3 or so, not too pricey. Then I went over to my closest Joann's and I brought in one of my twin flat sheet to match the thread to my fabric, and this is in the color Bahama. And these only cost about $2.50 or so, maybe $2.75, just depending. And you want the dual duty because you want it to be strong enough so that it will hold up throughout the year. And also, if you if you like the color of the sheets, this is in the color Turquoise Cove. So if you really like that, you can go and pick up that color at your nearby Walmart. Also, you'll need a pair of fabric scissors, which cost around, $7, $8 maybe? But you might already have a pair in your house, so just check with your mom or dad first to see if you have any. And then I also picked up this quilting board, which costs about $8. And this is how you measure and cut your ruffles, which I'll show later in the video. But it's about 6 inches wide because that's the size, ideally, that you want your ruffles so that you get the closest look to the Urban Outfitters bedspread. And then last, you will need a rotary mat or a cutting board just to protect your surfaces in your home so that they don't get cut up or anything. But other than that, and you'll need a sewing machine, but we'll get to that later also in the video. So let's get going. So the first thing you want to do after you get all your materials is you want to iron the sheets that you have bought, and since they have been folded, there's a lot of deep wrinkles that you want to get out before you cut your strips to make your ruffles. So what I do is I added a little water to my iron, and it's on the cotton steam setting, and I'll just go over it a couple times. And I'm ironing the king flat sheet right now, which is folded in half, and since the king is a lot thicker because of the fold, since it's bigger, I usually iron both sides of the king flat sheet, but I only usually need to iron just one side of the twin because the heat will go through both sides to get the wrinkles out on both sides. But for the king, just to make it extra flat, I usually flip it over once I'm done with this side and iron the other side. Okay, so once we're done ironing our sheets, next we need to start cutting the strips that we're going to be using to make our ruffles. So right here, all you need is your scissors and your quilting ruler and your rotary board or cutting board so that you don't ruin surfaces in your home. So this quilting board is 6 inches in width, which is the perfect size to make the ruffles, and you want to make sure that it's straight all the way along so that your ruffles don't go uphill or downhill and that they're straight. So I just trace it with my pencil, and since it's not long enough, I just scoot it and match it again to finish off the rest of the strip. Once we're done with that, you can set that aside and get your scissors, and we're going to slowly and carefully cut these strips. And once you're done cutting this one, you should cut 16 more. And voila, we have our first strip. And continue cutting the strips out of your king flat sheet, not your twin, because once you ruffle the king, it will turn out to be the perfect size for your twin. Okay, so once I'm finished cutting my strips out of my king flat sheet, I'm going to hem the sides because, as you can see, there's some strings and frays, and to prevent that from falling apart when you do put it on your bed, we're just going to fold it over and make a nice hem so that you'll have a nice, clean ruffle. So let's get started. And the thinner the better, because you want as much fabric as possible for your ruffle, because I personally think that the wider the fabric is, the prettier your bedspread ends up being, because the ruffles are so wide. Okay, so I'm almost done hemming my first ruffle, and as you can tell, it only takes about 5 or 6 minutes or so, as long as you're careful. And also keep in mind when you are hemming that you hem on the wrong side. As you can see, the hem from the manufacturer plant from the king flat versus the nice clean side, because you don't want to hem that side, because this side will be showing on your comforter and this one will be facing the bottom. So just keep that in mind. And also, don't forget to hem the rest of your strips, so I have 16 more remaining ones to go. Okay, so once we have finished hemming the side of our ruffle, we have to now make a long stitch on the opposite side. And the length that I have it on the sewing machine is at 4, and you want to make sure that you keep the strings pretty long so that later on when we have to start ruffling it, it'll make it much easier for you to pull the fabric through the thread. Okay, so once you've created your long stitch on your fabric, it's time to make the ruffles. So what we're going to do is, at the end you'll have 2 loose strings of thread, and one of them will allow you to pull the fabric through the piece of thread. And make sure you do this gently, because you don't want to break off the piece of thread, because then you will have no thread to string the fabric through. So you just keep pulling it down until you have ruffled it to the correct length. Now, I've already made these quite a lot, so I kind of have an idea, and after a little while you'll get the hang of when it starts to look like the correct length for your twin flat sheet. And then we can start pinning. Okay, so once we finish ruffling our strip, it is time to pin it on to our twin flat sheet. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking that this twin is a lot wider than most, but that's because it's a flat sheet, so they're figuring that you're tucking under your bed. And it'll be the perfect length to hang over the sides of your bed anyway. So, anyways, also, before you start pinning, you want to make sure that the hem is on the correct side, because if you pin it the opposite way, you'll have these really ugly edges, and that is not what you want. You want the nice clean edges to pin so that it will look its best once you are finished. Also, when we pin, you don't want to overlap a lot, because then you don't have to make as many ruffles. So just try to cover it up, just the top part. That's really all you need. Only about like 2 centimeters or so, if that. And we can start pinning. And if you need to adjust the ruffles to make it look more even, you can always feel free to do that. whatever you think looks best. Also, keep in mind that the more pins that you use, the easier it will be for you to sew it on in a straight line because you're constantly taking the pins out and making sure that it's straight versus guessing where the ruffle should lay. So just keep that in mind. The more the merrier. Okay, so now that we've pinned on our ruffle, it's time for us to sew it on to our twin flat sheet. Okay, so once we've finished sewing on our ruffle, I prefer that we trim it so that once you're done, it won't have a lot of loose threads everywhere. So I suggest that you trim yours too every time you're done sewing on a ruffle. So I just go by the top because we get a lot of loose threads when we're ruffling it since we're yanking the fabric. It kind of comes unraveled. So and just make sure not to cut the ruffles or the twin flat sheet. You just want to cut off the loose threads.